loud. Okay, good.
Perfect.
Good.
Got it.
I always forget to record it, so it's my number one priority.
Hey, that's good news.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. We're just working on the record button, but also waiting a minute or two for more people to come in. Okay. Susan, you want to go ahead? I think we're at 12:04 now.
We're at 12:04. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Fox. I just popped on at the beginning to say thank you for joining us. We've been working with Small Brooklyn Psychology and Mandy for what, 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah,
it's been a long time. And they always have great things to kind of manage our stress levels, get us help. Mandy will tell you more about those kinds of services, but I just wanted to get on and say hello. If you are a Park Slope Parents member, thank you for being a Park Slope Parents member. Really cool, best job in the world. Worst job in the world some days, but best job in the world too. And Sam will definitely take care of you, and I look forward to seeing some of you later and watching this recording later. So hello and goodbye.
Thanks so much, Susan. And thanks for everything that Park Slope Parents does for Small Brooklyn, but for the whole community. We're just so grateful that you exist. And I personally have benefited so much from Park Slope Parents. So I'm always happy to be a part of these conversations. To everyone coming in, people filtering in, welcome to our webinar. We are going to talk today about improving parent anxiety, and especially how we can make sure that it doesn't contribute to anxiety in your kids and your family. I am Mandy White-Ajmani. I'm the owner of Small Brooklyn Psychology. We are a group psychology practice at Industry City in Brooklyn, New York, where we offer therapy and neuropsychological assessment to people of all ages, all backgrounds, and all psychological concerns. You can see our team across the bottom here. That's me on the left, Natasha Brown, Rebecca Abbott Sinclair, Sam Jeannite, who's here with me today, Deidre Edwards, Nav Gill, Ben Jeannite, Maddie Lawler, and Danielle DeFilippo. And not in this picture because I'm behind on updating our photos is also our wonderful new postdoctoral psychologist, Dr. Olga Fuller. So Sam is going to be leading this webinar. We all have experience working with people across the lifespan, but we have special training and experience to work with kids and parents. And Sam has been wonderful at all of those. He has, yeah, wonderful, Sam. You have a long experience of working with kids and teens, parents, adults as well, but lots of different experience across different sorts of contexts. You know, we really appreciate that Park Slope Parents has asked us to lead this webinar today. It's always really great to be able to talk directly to people and give you information that you can use in your lives and really feel like we're making a difference in your world. You know, we've done a number of these webinars just like this in the past few years across a variety of psychological topics. So if you are interested in seeing any of those, you can find them for free on our website. It's at smallbrooklyn.com/services/talks. Now, during this talk, if you have any questions, make sure to type them to me in the Q&A box. I will monitor the questions as Sam talks, and then we're going to get to a Q&A session at the end of the talk. We'll answer some of the things that you are bringing up right now, but then also some of the things that have been asked during the registration process as well. So Sam, just to introduce him a little bit and sing some of his praises, he's a licensed New York State clinical psychologist. He completed his doctorate in school psychology, clinical child psychology at Pace University. He has worked before in Nassau University Medical Center, Mercy First Residential Treatment Facility, and League Education and Day Treatment Center. He has extensive experience, really does, in working with people of all ages across a wide variety of difficulties like complex trauma, anxiety, depression, developmental disorders, poor emotion regulation, conduct disorder, ADHD, poor social skills, and executive functioning difficulties. Right now, he's seeing a variety of different kinds of kids, adolescents, parents, adults. He's also leading a social skills group on comic books and social skills. So he's really helping quite a range of kids in our practice. He's also an adjunct professor at Pace University, and he's also a published children's author and illustrator. His first two books are Ella Has a Super Important Question and I Don't Need Sheep to Sleep, and they're both available on Amazon if you're interested. I think they're pretty great. So Sam, take it away. I'm going to go ahead and remove myself here and let you talk for a bit, and then I will come back to answer questions. So make sure, again, to put your questions in the Q&A box.
All right. Thank you, Mandy, and thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm hoping to be able to answer questions and hoping that this is as informative, like very informative for you. So let's get started. I feel like some of this is going to be a refresher, but I'm hoping that you'll get a lot of really good information regarding anxiety. And the webinar today is how to manage parent anxiety. Let's just make sure I can move ahead. There you go. All right. So what is anxiety? Everybody uses it. Everybody uses the word anxiety. And basically, anxiety is an alarm system that your body uses to tell you if there's danger, right? If you see a bear and you're in the forest and you say, oh, there's a bear. It's looking in my direction. I have fresh fish in my bag. Let me put down my bag and try to walk away, or whatever you do in order to make sure that you're safe from a bear, right? Your body tells you, oh my God, there's something happening. And anxiety, there are cognitive effects, physiological, emotional, and behavioral components that are involved in it, right? It's just, there's a wide range of things that occur that indicate anxiety. And it's different for different people in different situations. Some people overthink. Some people have a tightening of the chest. Some people sweat. Some people kind of get, like, depending on what it is, people have different reactions to anxiety, but we were able to figure out at least a wide range of what happens when people have anxiety and what does it look like and how do we work through that, right? Anxiety can be informative, and then in some situations, it's useful. If you are if you're a performer, if you have to even do this presentation, a little bit of anxiety is good. It kind of helps keep you aware. It helps keep you focused. It helps you kind of like get you on focus on what you need to do. Problem is that when anxiety becomes detrimental, that's where it's mainly an issue. That's how we hear about anxiety all the time, right? Because if you're stressed out, if you're finding that you're so stressed that you can't perform different activities, that you can't go to work, or you react to your friends and family members in a way that's not positive or kind of negative towards your relationship, these are the negative things that occur when a person does have anxiety. So you have to be aware of that. There are different ways to be aware of that. Like, we could talk about the symptoms of anxiety. Typically, people feel nervous, restless, tense. They have the feeling or sense of impending danger, panic or doom, right? So that dread, that feeling as if something bad is about to happen at any moment. And I've been there. I've experienced that sensation where it's like, oh no, there's nothing, something bad is going to happen. What do we do? You get that increased heart rate, hyperventilation, sweating, and trembling, right? These are some of the symptoms. Some of them are physiological, cognitive symptoms that we have when we have anxiety. And oftentimes, as a result, in terms of the behavioral, we do things like avoid, right? We do things to avoid anxiety, which is, we'll talk about that very shortly. So I've used this before, and this is the GAD-7, and it's a measure that that psychologists sometimes use for research purposes, but also when you're trying to gather some really basic information. And I thought it would be helpful for us to kind of determine where your anxiety is. And so I want you to take a moment and read through this. And, you know, first we have, there are 7 questions right now, and then it starts off with not at all sure, which is at 0, and nearly every day is 3. And then, you know, you kind of take account for yourself and add up your score to determine how extreme your anxiety may be at this point. So for example, number 1 is feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge. If it's for several days a week, it might be certain things that are happening that would be more anxiety provoking than other things. So you would put 1, but if it's nearly every day, as soon as you wake up, that's a 3. 2, not being able to stop or control your worrying. 3, worrying too much about different things. 4, trouble relaxing. 5, being so restless that it's hard to sit still. 6, becoming easily annoyed or irritable. And then 7, feeling afraid as if something awful might happen. And if you get a perfect score of 21, then I would say you're, at least within the last 2 weeks, highly anxious. If you, as the score goes lower, I think it's breaks up into a range of 5, I think. So anywhere between, I feel like 18 and 21 is more on the higher end, and it kind of breaks down, and then you could determine where you are on that scale. And then the last question it has here is, how does it affect your life? Does it affect your work? Does it affect things at home? Does it affect the way you get along with people? And if it's, sometimes for people, it's not difficult at all. They might have a lot of anxiety, but they make sure things are okay. And then for some people, it's extremely difficult. So that's another important factor. I think what happens is, in life, there are times when we do get anxious. Life happens, transition at work, family issues. You are anxious now, but you can manage it and that you will get it under control. So then maybe it won't affect your daily life and daily living situation or anything like that so significantly. But if it's every single day for a very long time, over time, it has an effect on your life. All right. So how does anxiety affect your parenting? So this is why we're here. This is what we're here to talk about. So there are a couple of things that come up when it talks about anxiety and how it affects your parenting. So you have the first thing that comes up is overprotection, which is we have on the next slide, which will kind of focus up on overprotection. But you're really kind of hovering over your child. You need to make sure that you're perfectly safe. You need to make sure that everything is going the way it needs to go. And if it doesn't go, oh no, like you need to protect your child. So these are things that come up in terms of overprotection. Avoidance of uncomfortable situations. This is also important. When a person has anxiety, one of the big things that they do is they try to avoid things that make you anxious. If you see a spider in the room and you're not a fan of spiders, you don't go into the room, right? It's very anxiety provoking. I remember as a kid, there was I was very young and my parents were like, go get something in the basement. And as I'm walking down the basement, I see 2 glowing yellow eyes in my basement. And I promise you, I did not go back to the basement for another month, only to find out it was a cat that somehow snuck into the house and we were able to get it out afterwards. But, I avoided, I don't want to go down there. Oh, you need something in the basement? I will fight you tooth and nail to go down there. Because when I saw those 2 glowing eyes, that was very scary and it was anxiety provoking. And only when I realized it was a cat, which, it still was anxiety provoking for me, at least I was able to manage it and start to enter the basement again. Accommodation, which we will also talk about, right? And the idea that you want to help your child avoid anything that is invoking or provoking and creating stress. Constant worrying about your child's health. Again, as a parent, I have a parent of a 3-year-old. Sometimes, we see a rash or we see a behavior, or we see something that happens and, we're like, oh my God, is this a problem? Is this an issue, right? It's natural. We do have those feelings. We want our child to be protected. We want to make sure that they're healthy. But if you're constantly worrying about their health, if every little thing you're like, oh my God, I need to freak out. What do we do? I think when I first had my child, it freaked me out. She had a flu and it was during COVID. So we all had COVID. So it was really sad at the moment, but she had the flu. She didn't have the flu. She had COVID. We're pretty sure she had it. She was just a baby. And she was having a lot of high temperature. So we were like, oh no, what do we do? So we call the doctor, we call him, the doctor's like, Sam, it's okay. Is your baby acting differently? And I'm like, no, she's cooing, she's laughing, she's playing, she's doing all that other stuff. And I said, all right, if any change in behavior, let us know. Just monitor the flu, monitor the fever, monitor her temperature, make sure that she's okay. So then for the next couple of days, while we're trying to get better, we're monitoring the baby's temperature, and it fluctuated, went up and down. But what we were noticing is that her behavior and everything stayed the same. And while it was very anxiety provoking, once she started to get better and her fever stabilized, we're like, okay, I think we're out of the woods. So that's anxiety provoking. That's a lot of anxiety. But now imagine constantly worrying about it, constantly looking at it, every little problem, any little cough, and then saying, I have to go to the doctor. We need to do this. These are things that affect your child. They affect the way your child views themselves, they view the world, and how you view the situations as well. Developmental milestones, that's another big thing. Again, you have a young child and you're worrying about whether or not they are able to walk. Are they talking at a certain point in time? Are they making friends? Are they learning what they need to learn? Are they understanding different topics, especially if you have older kids in high school? Are they ready to be independent? So you're worried about developmental milestones. So then what I find parents doing is that they're like, well, we need to work on it. We need to make sure it works. And of course, even with developmental milestones, there's a range for it. Some kids are on the later end, some kids are on the earlier end. We just have to monitor. I remember, like I had to kind of stop myself as a psychologist because I know a lot more in regards to child development. So then now I'll, have my daughter and I'll go visit a friend or a family member and they have kids as well. And if they're doing something different for my daughter, I remember having to tell myself, slow down, Sam, don't freak out. It's okay. It's fine. Just because their kid is talking and my kid is picking up stuff and eating it off the floor, it's perfectly okay. And then it was okay. It was okay. Now, does that mean you should ignore everything? Absolutely not. You kind of document, you gather as much information as possible, and then you kind of make the best informed decision, but your decision shouldn't be made solely on your anxiety in the moment. It should be made on the facts that you have and what is happening and where you might find certain issues are occurring. Friendships, like we touch base on that, like, are they making friends? Are they not making friends? Who are their friends? All that other things. And achievement, it can affect their grades. It can affect how they do in school. Oftentimes parents, it's kind of touchy in regards to that because as parents, you want your kids to do well in school. If they're very smart, you want them to be on top of their game, right? And you want, because it affects the way they feel about themselves, it affects their future in the long run. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. But oftentimes I find even when kids have a lot of anxiety or are very intelligent, they get very anxious around it because sometimes they freak out when there's something is too hard for them. So they don't want to do it because they don't want to fail. And they don't want to try it because failure is an issue. And so how you address failure, how you address issues that happen at school, those things can affect their overall development. So things that you should be aware of. And like, as you can see here, like my little cartoon says, I can't do this. And that constant feedback of I can't do this, for you as a parent, is one of those things that we want to eventually start to work on. Okay, so overprotection is the big thing. So that's the hovering, the helicoptering that may occur. So what it does is that it inhibits age-appropriate independence. We want our children to be independent, right? You want them to be able to do things independently. You want them to be able to make friends or talk to other people or to do work or learn different skills. And these are skills that you want your kids to grow with, right? But if you are constantly protecting them and doing everything for them, it inhibits their ability to kind of gain that mastery. It conveys to the child that child a sense that the world is dangerous. This is a tricky one for me because it depends on your neighborhood. It depends on where you live. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. For some people, the world is a little bit dangerous. For some people, it's not, or there are protective factors around it. So These things, while again, you have to take it into context within different family dynamics, right? So for this particular situation, if their world is protected, if they, have people that are around them, have people surrounding them, you don't want your child to have the sense that the world is dangerous, right? Because then now they get stuck into that. They don't want to interact with other people. They don't want to become independent. They don't want to develop the skills that they need to develop because they've been told that no matter where they go, what they do, you are in danger. And that's what we want to avoid as best as possible. So that's a more nuanced thing that we could talk about a little bit later. You reinforce avoidance, right? So you do things to make sure that you to avoid your to make yourself feel better and less anxious, but also to make the child feel less anxious, and that's not helpful as well. Entitlement, which is a big one for children, especially as they get older. They might start to feel as if everything needs to be done for them. They deserve certain things. My mom used to do this for me, but my dad used to do this for me. And even this doesn't mean for just toddlers or young children, but this goes into high school and college level. I teach at the college level right now. And from time to time, I'll have parents contact me. They don't have any permission to contact me. I can't talk to them, but then they'll contact me talking about grades and talking about this and talking about that. And, sometimes I respectfully say, hey, I can't really talk to you about this unless your child gives me permission or unless we sit down and talk about this together. Because now in this moment, this parent is trying to do everything for that child. They're trying to kind of make sure that they stay on top of their grades. Or I've heard stories of parents, even with children well into their adulthoods, still kind of, making sure that their child wakes up to go to work or do other things. And it's like, they're an adult now. They need to take that responsibility for themselves. And I think there's a difference between something cute that you do with your child because that's what you've been doing all your life versus something you're doing because it's your anxiety. Oh, they're not going to go to work, even though they're 25, 30, if I don't call them. That's something that we need to address. And limits the child's opportunity to develop skills and confidence in managing potential challenges. That's the big thing. They don't feel as if they have the skills to deal with problems. We can't predict what the problems are going to be in the world. You can't predict what issues a person is going to have. But what you can do is help a child develop the skills and the resilience to deal with it when it happens. And if you're constantly overprotecting, you're constantly making it easy for them, as you can see in this. I love this picture. I saw it and I was like, this has to go into the PowerPoint. Like, I loved it. If you're constantly doing that, what's happening is that the child, yes, you feel happy, they feel happy, but then overall, they don't learn how to deal with stuff that is stressful in their lives, which will happen. So what you want to do is to work on, well, how do I not hover? How do I not micromanage my child? How do I not do things that are overprotective? Like, there are things that you might have to be protective of, but you have to be very cognizant of, well, if I'm going to be protective of this, when is the timetable for me to kind of start backing up? When should I start working on this child to learn? It's like, I've worked with some parents, and sometimes I use like the child kind of getting the cookie jar, trying to get the cookies. So it's one thing to just walk over and grab the cookies for the child and say, here's a cookie. And it's another thing for the child to try to push the chair and then climb the chair and then reach over and try to grab the cookie and do all the things. So there's difference between that. If you see the child trying to actively grab the cookies, I wouldn't rush over and grab the cookies for them. Right, especially if it's like, there's other caveats, but we're just focusing on the cookies. I wouldn't rush over. I would see what they do. I want to see how they problem solve. I want to see how they work to get the cookies on the shelf, because that is a life skill. Now they've learned, if I have a problem, let me think through this. But if every time they're trying to grab something or they're trying to get something and you rush to get it for them, then they're not learning, oh, I could use a chair for this. I can do this. I can do that. I can do this. They're not learning that. What they've learned is, if I try to do something, mom, dad, somebody's going to come and get it for me. And that's not a useful strategy for a person to have in their life. So something for you to think about. The accommodation, okay? Everything a parent does to help a child avoid anxiety-related distress. So maintaining rigid routines. There's nothing wrong with us having a schedule. Nothing wrong. Like I promote it all the time, especially when you're trying to help a child learn executive functioning skills or help a child deal with anxiety. Oftentimes you need a schedule in order to help you and help the child and help everybody stay on track and to help them through the schedule, right? I think the work would be, how do we help you get on the schedule and how do you help you stay on the schedule? But then, for example, if it becomes, I need to maintain this routine because if I do not, my child is going to freak out. That would be more of an accommodation. Answering repeated questions, often having to reassure the child. Everything is going to be okay. Are you going to pick me up after school? Yes, I pick you up after school every single day. Are you going to pick me up? Yes, I am going to pick you up 5 times, 20 times, constantly answering the question. So part of the work would be, hey, I know it's anxiety provoking that you will not get picked up, for you, it's anxiety provoking because your child is saying that they're asking constant questions about getting picked up. So you can make a plan around that. Hey, I'm not going to answer that question anymore. As you know, I'm going to let you know if I'm not picking you up, and this is how we're going to do it. And you make a plan around it, and then you follow through. And the child may feel out of anxiety. They might get angry. They might get frustrated. They might even have a tantrum and saying, answer my question. And he says, I will be more than happy to answer any question but that question, because you're teaching them how to manage their anxiety. And then once they manage it, they're like, oh, okay, mom, dad, they're going to pick me up unless they tell me otherwise. And then I'll know exactly who, I know exactly when, I'll know exactly how, because they'll let me know ahead of time. And then you're teaching your child how to manage their anxiety. All right, so you got this another fancy picture, which I thought which should definitely hop into the PowerPoint. So you get the idea of snowplow parenting. You're moving every obstacle away from your children. You're trying to make things easier. And sometimes you think you're helping, right? You are helping. You're trying to kind of make sure everything goes well. But what happens when you're a snowplow parenting is that they're not learning any problem-solving skills. They're only learning, hey, mom and dad or somebody in my life is going to do it for me. And oftentimes, we don't want to do that. We want to be able to create an atmosphere where a child can learn how to develop skills in terms of resilience, the ability to deal with anxiety. And if you're doing all these things and you're realizing that they are continuing to have anxiety, then we go to therapy, we go to treatment, we can have them in therapy in order to kind of figure out what is going on, why is this anxiety so significant, why are the strategies you're using working. So strategy for parental anxiety. You learn what triggers your fears by developing your self-awareness. You do that through meditation, through therapy, through exercise. You kind of become or try to help yourself become more self-aware. Understand your perception, understand how your actions affect your children, right? Or affect the people around you. I think it's one thing, oftentimes I'll hear people say, well, they do things to get me anxious. And I said, okay, what did they do? Well, they just have a hard time. I just don't understand why they just put the stuff where they need to be. And I said, okay, so I can see how that's frustrating for you. What can we do differently to help you act, to help you in this situation? And then typically the response is, well, they need to do what they need to do. I said, yeah, I know we're going to get there, but what can you do differently? Focus on yourself. Focus on what you need. How do you maintain yourself? So for example, we'll talk about that after, but when you go to make a plan, we'll talk about what making a plan would look like. Find ways to boost your self-confidence. Do things that are fun, do things that are exciting, do things that make you feel happy. Don't neglect your self-care, which is really important. Practice and model stress tolerance, right? So this is important. We model our behaviors. Oftentimes, as human beings, we have the ability, and other animals, but human beings, we have the ability to we don't just learn simply by I do it, and then if I touch the fire, I burn. and I say, oh, don't touch the fire again, it burns. What we do is, if I see somebody else touch the fire and they get burned, some people will still touch the fire, and other people will say, you know what, I'm not going to touch that. They got burned, right? We have the ability to learn through modeling. So what we need to do is we need to model, but also practice our own stress tolerance. We have to think to ourselves, how will this look for my child? If I'm in a stressful moment, I could react to this in a very stressful, chaotic way, or I could calm myself down and react to this in an appropriate way. So if I'm on the phone with the bank and I'm having an issue with my account, you know, my inclination is I'm going to scream and yell and be upset. But then if my child is right next to me, maybe I would say, let me calm down. Let me have a more appropriate conversation with the teller on the line, because I want them to see how it is that they should act. And I'm also trying to keep myself calm throughout this process. Make a plan. If things are stressful in the morning to get the kids ready, what can you plan out the night before? That is reasonable. So sometimes if we don't make a plan, then, you know, I'll have situations like that. I wake up in the morning and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to get here too early and haven't ironed my shirt. And then my daughter's running up and down. And on some days she's calm, and other days she's like, daddy, 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 daddy. And I'm like, oh no, I need to iron my shirt. I need to do this. And it gets very stressful. So what I do is I plan ahead. What can I do to make my morning easier? And when I do that, oftentimes things are significantly easier. Like, you know, I know parents who kind of prepare breakfast earlier on or on the night before, right? You have overnight oats. There's French toast casseroles and things like that you could plan overnight, pop it into the oven, get dressed, and then and everybody gets fed the next day. Now, it takes a lot of work, especially if that's not your inclination. But if you start doing this from time to time, even one day a week, where you say, this Friday is my day where I'm going to plan out everything the night before, and I'm going to see how that works. And then you could see if it works, you do that consistently, then you could add another day. You could do other things in a way to help you manage your anxiety. Practice positive thinking daily with affirmations. Write them out, put them around the house. You know, positive thinking, positive statements, keep saying them. Oftentimes the example that I use with children, adults, but even with children, especially with sports, I said, you know, you're playing sports and you're like, were you always good at basketball? And they're like, no, you know, I sucked. And now I'm like fantastic. And I was like, well, how did you just automatically become fantastic at it? It was like, no, I had to constantly dribble and shoot and do all these other things in order to get good at it. Or even drawing. Yeah, I wasn't very good until I constantly practiced, and then I got better at it. Similar to your mental health, similar to your affirmations, you're constantly practicing, I will be okay. Everything will be okay. I can do this. It's only stress in the moment. Those are the things you are practicing, because as you practice them, you're kind of telling your brain, you're also rewinding your brain in that moment. You're telling your brain, even though your brain is telling you, no, I can't do this, there's another part of your brain that's forcefully saying, but what if I can? What if I can do this? What if I do this? What if I make this change? Small changes that can help you over a period of time. So you develop a support system by honestly sharing your feelings, frustration, anger, concerns. You learn to tolerate change, because children change often, and you and the children both change moods and feelings. You tolerate it, you deal with it, and then you take it in stride. And it's a practice. You have to almost practice it regularly. And again, it's not easy early on, but the more you practice it, the better you get. You remind yourself you're not perfect. There's no perfect decision. And then you learn to catch yourself when you are making negative statements. Be selfish, but in a healthy way. Free yourself from needing outside approval. Oftentimes, I find situations where parents would be alongside everything else. They'll say, well, I don't want other people to think this way about me. And I say, you know what? I can understand that concern. You don't want people to look at you in a different way. You don't want people to think differently about you. So these things are important, But at the same time, you know, if you're having difficulty, if you're struggling, worrying about other people isn't going to make it better. Focus on what you need to do. Focus on your steps. Focus on your goals. Because as you focus on your goals and things are getting better, things will align itself. But if you're focusing on, oh, well, you know, I don't want to look bad, so I'm going to get to school late because my child continues to have difficulty, then what you're teaching a child at the same time is, this is how mom avoids her anxiety. This is how dad avoids anxiety. And in actuality, you want to teach your child, listen, I'm going to do things that are uncomfortable for me. And I want you to start doing those things. Here, I found this cool graphic online, and I spent the night redrawing it, but I thought it would be useful. You know, there's this graphic here where it talks about things you can control versus things that matter, and then you want to focus right there in the middle, right? So because there are things that matter in your life, so and then there are things you can control. Like for example, here you could control your actions, you could control your self-care, your attitude, how you respond to situations, what you wear. Right. I think whenever I do any type of interview, webinar, anything, I always make sure that I feel great. I make sure I wear a nice shirt, and I make sure that I, eat a good breakfast, because those things I know I can control, and I know I can help myself feel better and feel calmer by doing the things that make me feel happy. Here, the things that matter, my loved ones, your time, your values, your peace. These are things that matter. There might be a lot of other things that matter to you, right? You may not have full control over them, but they matter. So you want to live in that sweet spot, that focus spot. And then again, here are the things you cannot control: another person's actions, the traffic, the past, the weather. At the time you could control it because it's current, but once it's done, it's done. Now you can't control it. It already happened. So now you're saying to yourself, these are the things outside of my sphere. I think what happens with a lot of people is that they start to think that they can control the things that they really can't control. You think you can control the weather, and it's unreasonable. It's not that you actually think it, but then in your mind, you get so angry when it's colder than you thought it was going to be, or warmer than you thought it was going to be. Or you get so angry when you think about the past, which is important, but then now you're not able to let it go. Or you go so angry about another person's actions, which there might be certain things that are legitimate things to be concerned about, but is it in the area of your personal control? So then you start to practice this, like, what is it that is in my control? What are the things? Make a list. What are the things that I can do? For example, when you make a plan, those are things you can control. Those are things you can do. So again, back to self-care, you maintain a manageable schedule. Therapy, meditation, you combat negative and unhelpful thoughts. You work out, you find problems. If there is a problem, you find and prioritize problems to solve it. I remember having a conversation with my wife, and we approach problem solving differently. For her, she says, you know what? In order for me to feel better, I do the big problem first, and then I do all the little stuff in between. And I say, oh, I'm different. I like to do the small things first, and then I tackle the big problem first, right? And it's based on how we perceive anxiety. Because for me, if I get rid of all the small things, all my energy could go towards the big thing. For her, she can't deal with the small things if there's a big issue. So when she manages that, then she deals with the small issues. So whenever she's dealing with her stuff, and I say, this is her stuff. Let me see how I can help her by maybe helping her with the small things. So that when she's done with the big issue, she's like, oh, all the little issues are done. Great. And vice versa, right? Maybe she might start working on the big issue while I knock out all the little issues, and then I'll come in and help her finish up the big issue. So these are things that we can do in order to help each other and help with the support system and help us understand how we think about problem solving. How do we think about issues? Some people are great at breaking down problems to their small parts. Some people are great at seeing the forest for the street. They could see the whole big picture. It's okay if you have that skill. Then what you do is, who do you lean on to help you with the other stuff, the details? Who do you lean on to help you focus on the big picture? So another thing that happens is that we have the idea of, in terms of good enough parenting, right? There's so much pressure in this world. Like there's so much expectations and things that people want from us that we feel like we have to accomplish, right? So oftentimes if we don't do it, or if there's a problem, we say, we're not good enough. I'm not doing enough. Oftentimes, if you are worried enough to think that you're not doing enough, then you're probably doing a lot. Because the fact that you're worried about it, the fact that you're like thinking about it, you're like, you are doing something. The fact that you wake up and take care of your child and you make sure that they're fed and all these other, you are doing the things you need to do. Now when it comes to your own aspirations and your goals, all those other things, yes, while those are important, you have to kind of say, what am I doing good? Let's focus on the positive. What are the things I need to work on? What are the things that I could do different to help my child and help me, right? When it kind of expressed that you can do your best, but not everything for your children. You can only do your best, but not everything. So oftentimes things could get really bad, or if you might feel, you know what, Dr. Sam, you know, you haven't said anything I ever heard before. I still have difficulty. So then you might need some extra help. You could go to therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, there's space therapy, support parenting for anxious childhood emotions. If there's a management issue, you could do parent management therapy. There's PCIT. There's a lot of different types of therapies. If there's a trauma involved, there's trauma-focused CBT. There's narrative therapy. There's a lot of different therapies and a lot of different ways to address the issues. It's just you thinking, well, what are the issues? If things are bad, sometimes we might consider medication management, seeing a psychiatrist if things get bad enough, or not just bad, but if you're feeling that you're not making progress and it's affecting your life, there are different ways to address it. And another thing is parenting groups. Oftentimes I find it great when I'm able to just talk with parents and talk with, talk with somebody about like, this is what's going on with my life. Have you experienced this? It's like, yes. And I was like, really? So I'm not alone. And that makes it feel a lot better. So in conclusion, you're not alone. You're not a bad parent. We'll get through this. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Hopefully that you, I'm free to answer as many questions as you have right now. And thank you very much for your time. Hopefully I didn't talk too quickly.
No, I thought that was awesome, Sam. As always, of course. All right, someone is asking you to go back to the slide, the things that matter slide. Let's leave that up for now and we can go through some of these questions. Awesome. Yeah, it's a really good reminder, actually, the things that actually matter. So one of my questions, and I think echoes a lot of, what was asked in registration as well, is, parents are worried about passing their anxiety on to their kids, and you've addressed a lot of that. Is there anything more that you can say about when a child already has anxiety? Are there any special considerations? Are there additional things that parents should be doing for parents who are anxious, but their kids also already have their anxiety? And, you talked at the end about space, which is a, therapy that we both love. I know that you've been using space a lot with parents that is specifically about working with parents to help their child anxiety. So I would just love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
So oftentimes, again, it's important to kind of really understand what does their anxiety look like, right? I think it's one thing, I've talked with parents and they're like, well, this feels like anxiety. It feels like it's not typical. It feels like they're having a hard time either sleeping or eating, or there's a lot of anxiety that could be around a lot of different things. So oftentimes what I try to help parents understand it, or at least when we're looking at accommodations in space, is, well, what is the child trying to avoid, right? Is the child trying to, or well, not just trying to avoid it, what are they trying to avoid for themselves? So if they're having separation anxiety, they want to be around you. They don't like not being around you. They don't like going to school. They don't like doing certain things because they always want to be around you, and they have a strong reaction to it. And then if you are accommodating, now you do all the little things to help them avoid that thing that makes them very anxious.
The not being around you.
Not being around you, right? Or another thing when it goes into food, which is very touchy subject for a lot of families, but I'll have situations where they're like, no, they'll only eat French toast. And I
Good choice.
Yeah, they only eat French toast. Great choice, right? But I said, what if you don't have bread that morning? So they won't eat anything else. And then I freak out because they have to have breakfast. And I said, oh, did they eat the night before? Yes. Do they eat lunch? Oh my gosh, they eat a lot of lunch. I said, so if you put a bowl of cereal in front of them and say, hey, sorry, I don't have French toast, I'll get bread later, and they won't eat it, is it the end of the world? They have to eat something. Yes, they should eat something. I agree with you 110%.
Mm-hmm.
But is it the end of the world if they don't eat breakfast this morning?
Yep.
And that's the kind of anxiety, like, well, I'm a bad parent. They haven't eaten. They're going to have a bad morning at school. I know. We could work through it. Maybe we might get something else. Maybe that's something to work on. Maybe we could say, all right, we don't have bread. I'm not going to go out to get you bread, but we have to eat something. Let's find something to eat. But you also have to go to school. So we're not going to be late just because you didn't have bread and French toast this morning.
Yeah.
So now your child having to deal with the anxiety of, you mean I don't get French toast? Yes, you don't get French toast today. It's okay. It sucks. But you'll get it tomorrow. What can we do today? So our goal would be to make a plan around how do we help when we don't have French toast? And if you want to work with me, eventually part of the plan would be, you know what? We're not buying bread. Or eventually we might get to the point where we do have the bread and you still might say, we're not having French toast today. We're having eggs and bacon. All right? So something for you to think about. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. So much of anxiety treatment for kids and adults has to do with, like you said, building those skills that allow them to see themselves as problem solvers, as resilient, as able to tolerate the fear and distress that comes up with the worry. And so when parents are allowing kids to not do things that make them anxious, often as a way of assuaging our own anxiety, kids are not developing those skills. And so space is really focused on slowly removing some of those accommodations to help kids to build those muscles. So one of the questions is about overprotection. How does a parent know what the line, I guess, between appropriate protection and overprotection? You have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a tough one for me, I think, because like I said, there are situations where if you don't live in a nice neighborhood, no, I wouldn't want my kid to sit at my 10-year-old to stand at the bus stop. Right?
Yeah.
That's not a question about overprotecting. That's me protecting my child because I know that at that particular bus stop, there have been multiple issues and there are a lot of high school kids and a lot of this and a lot of that, and they're too young to be around this situation. I don't think it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's a reasonable concern. The idea is you have to kind of, at least what I would use personally and what I would help my clients do, let's look at the facts. What are you protecting them from?
Real danger versus distress, internal distress.
And perceive. So there are things that you perceive as danger that is not dangerous.
Mm.
Right? What is real danger? There are things that are real danger.
Sure. So just considering the real risk involved in and making a decision, I guess, based on the real risk of what's happening.
Yeah. So what that happens though is that what if you have trouble perceiving what's real and what's not reality, but like what if you think everything is dangerous? Mm-hmm. Teachers are dangerous. The school is dangerous. The bus is dangerous. The friends are dangerous. Other parents. If you perceive everything is dangerous, now the question is that true? And do we need support? So we need like a sounding board, someone that you trust. Because if you find somebody else who's saying, oh, yes, you're correct, everything is dangerous, you're like, all right, I'm fine.
I'm right.
But you sometimes need to find somebody who you trust that may not agree with you and to say, hey, I think you're overthinking this. For example, a good example, if your child is having issues with friends and they're having issues, right? Mm-hmm. Your inclination is, let me help my child do this. Let me talk to the friend. Let me talk to the parent. Let me do this. Let me do that. In order to, well, you don't understand. Your child did this. That's why you made my child feel bad. So what you think you're doing is protecting them, but what in actuality, you're taking away their ability to make decisions.
Sure.
You're taking away their ability to say, you know what? I had a bad situation with this friend, and now I have to choose whether I want to be friends with that person or not. And that, while, again, there are situations where you might have to intervene, that doesn't mean you need to intervene in every situation. The only thing you can do is to say, hey, this is what I would do. This is what I think you should do. It is ultimately your choice. But you want to help your child develop a self-esteem. How can they develop self-esteem? How can they develop self-worth if you tell them, well, you can't be friends with that person anymore?
Or I don't trust you to make the decisions about whether you can be friends with that person anymore.
Oh,
you're not ready yet. You're not good enough to make that decision yet.
You're not capable of making that decision. And it's one thing if I see
an inadvertent.
But I've seen that even for teenagers. Oh, you can't be friends with that person. I was like, what did they do? Well, they just had an argument. Okay, so they could deal with it.
Okay.
Right. And then, or some parents would say, well, I'm not going to do anything. And then they make their child feel bad for making their own decision. Like, that's another thing. You have to kind of be able to kind of truly step back and allow them to make their decisions.
And sometimes they're not going to be great decisions, right? And they're going to learn from those mistakes.
And then you have to kind of think to yourself, well,
that's so hard.
It's terrifying. Like, listen, I have my own kid. There are times I'm like I want to hold my breath, right? And then I have to kind of remind myself, Sam, calm down. Calm down. Because you can't do everything for that child. You can do the best you can.
That's right. Best you can, but not everything. I love that quote. We have time for maybe just one more question. And a lot of the questions on the registration had to do with, they really wanted some specific steps, strategies, things like that. So how about if we take a situation like you have an anxious parent, trying to get their kid out the door in the morning. It's fraught with, lateness and irritability and time deadlines and things like that. Can you kind of walk us through the steps of how a parent can manage their anxiety, not, lose it on the kid, but it's a very real situation where they need to get to work, kids need to get to school, that sort of stuff. What would you do?
So you have a timetable. So first thing what you can do is let's assess the problem. Let's assess what's actually going on. Sometimes I'll talk with families and they'll say something like, the morning is horrible. And I say, okay, what's horrible about the morning? And then the only thing that actually is horrible about the morning is the traffic. Or the only thing that's horrible about the morning is the fact that everybody gets ready, but right when it's time to leave, all of a sudden everybody everybody gets a little bit frantic. And then now something, when you thought everybody was ready, they're not ready, right? Identify the problem. What is the problem? Like, really break it down. And I think even for anybody, like as a therapist, sometimes I can see my clients get annoyed with me because I'm like, let's go back to the morning. And they're like, why are you asking me about the morning? And I was like, because I really want to go through this with a fine tooth comb. Like, I want to know when you brush your teeth. I want to know how long it takes you to make breakfast. Like, things are important. And then once we are able to break it down, we start to realize, oh, you're not giving yourself enough time.
Okay. So looking at it specifically.
You have a family of 5 and you expect everybody to get ready in 1 hour, and you only have 1.5 bathrooms.
Okay.
Somebody has to get up early.
All right. So identifying the problem and then like figuring out where the bottleneck is.
Yes. And
What
then
else?
once you identify it, then you start to plan around it. What can we do differently? Right? Once we see the problem, we plan. What can we do differently? What's happening? Where do I start to lose control? If you are with some parents, the anxiety so much, you start to anticipate a problem even before it happens. Or it's like anticipating an argument before it happens. So then now your hypervigilance, your hackles are raised. You're like,
you're already on edge. You're probably getting irritable.
So then now what you're trying to do is once you identify those issues, you're like, okay, I am on edge. I get on edge in the morning. What can I do to help my edge? Right? What is the thing that I constantly repeat? Where's your shoes? Okay, if every morning I say, where are your shoes? What should you do the night before? Let's put all the shoes by the door.
Okay.
Right?
Love it. Yeah.
If you need to help your children plan the night before, everybody needs to have their clothes ready, down to the underwear, down to the hairpin. Have it ready on the side. This is your stuff. And then if the child is anxious, well, I can't find my hairpin. Oh man, we have to go. But I'm not leaving. Oh, I hear you. But the plan is we have to go. And if it doesn't work out, then now you can make a plan. Like now we have to set up a behavioral plan. Now we have to kind of say, you know what? There are certain reinforcements you get by being able to follow the directions. And if you don't follow the directions, it's going to be frustrating for everybody, but also you won't be able to get that reinforcement.
Okay. So now say you've made a plan, you've identified the problem, you have got everything and things are going reasonably well, but just before you're going out the door, some big crisis happens you can't really plan for. Something like kids' homework gets completely eaten by the dog, let's say.
Well, yeah.
Parents' anxiety is now, how does the parent stop themselves from completely losing it in that moment?
All right. Well, for me, what I do is I try to kind of go back to that model of like, what are the things you can control? What are the things you can't control?
Great.
Right?
Love it.
For example, let's take that example about the dog eating the homework, right? Eating all the homework. You're like, oh my God, this actually happens. Now in your head, you're like, the teacher and all this other stuff, and the teacher's gonna look at me wrong. Okay, I'm gonna write a letter, an email saying, hey, this actually happened. And then I'm not gonna stop everything and do the homework right then and there. We're gonna go. There are things this is one of those things that
you can't control.
We cannot control it, right? Next time, part of the plan, make sure the dog is in another room.
Sure.
Right? So that way now when you're planning, it's like, oh, is everybody homework? Okay, good. We can leave. You see what I mean? Because now we planned for it. So again, that doesn't mean you're not going to run into issues. You are going to run into issues. It just means now, oh, I ran into an issue. Oh, we need to fix that. Right? Like, if you an engineer and you build a spaceship, you don't build it the first time around. It's like you build it and something blows up and you're like, oh, I should have put the boat there instead of there. My math was wrong.
Hopefully your consequences won't be as big as that.
Right, I mean, hopefully it doesn't like a complete, international disaster. I'm just,
right.
Maybe like a small explosion, like a manageable one in a controlled environment, right? And then you're like, oh, I could do that differently. And then once you do that differently, you're like, let's try that again. Let's try that again. And then again, as you consistency, try it, you make improvements. And as you make improvements, and don't expect your anxiety to just disappear, because I think people are looking for the magic pill, right? You're looking for your anxiety to all of a sudden, like, I made a plan and now I feel better. No, you're going to feel like shit. Sorry. You're going to feel like crap.
And of course, there's always that first moment when something happens where it's like like the steam coming out of the ears because the anxiety and the fear is so high, and like the, oh my God, what do I do in this moment sort of place. That with practice, you can learn to start taking some breaths, give yourself some distance from that immediate emotional reaction. It's going to take some practice, like Sam is saying, but then to even get to those rational thoughts of like, whew, what can I control? What can't I control? I think it's a good mantra, actually, to just try and keep like repeat that in the front of the brain. This is something I can't control. What can I control in this situation? This is one of those things. I think that's awesome. We have to end. This is an awesome webinar, Sam, as always. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for joining us. You know, if you need more help with this, whether it's a short consultation or ongoing therapy, please always feel free to reach out to Small Brooklyn Psychology. Even if we are not the right ones to be able to help you, we are happy to try and connect you to somebody who can. Thanks, as always, to Parksville Parents for having us. We always really appreciate your trust and all the work that you do for the community. And thanks again to Sam. So have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.